Hey, I'm Dan from The Verge, and check this thing out. So you're probably wondering what just happened there, so let's talk about it. This is Oppo's new phone, the Find X. Now you may not be familiar with Oppo, but they're a big smartphone brand in China, and they're actually owned by the same company that owns OnePlus, which you probably are familiar with if you've seen this channel before. And this phone is their new flagship phone, which is going to be launched globally for the first time. And yes, it'll be available here in North America, which I'll talk about in a bit. But let's talk about this phone here. So what you're seeing is a big 6.4-inch OLED display, and it's going edge to edge with no bezel, or almost no bezels, no notch, and basically no chin. So in order to build this phone and accommodate the camera, Oppo put the camera in a motorized slide-out tray that pops up when you open the camera app and disappears when you close it. It's pretty trick. Now in this camera tray are both the front camera and rear cameras, and there's some interesting things going on here. Now the rear camera is a 16 megapixel and 20 megapixel dual camera system, pretty similar to what we've seen with a bunch of dual cameras on phones before. It does portrait mode effects and all that kind of stuff. But the front camera is a 25 megapixel sensor, and it's got 3D face scanning sensors in here, not unlike what you get on the iPhone X. Now those 3D scanners can do things like automatically beautify your image, which is very popular on a lot of phones from China, or it also works to log you in so that when you turn on the phone and unlock it, the camera pops up, sees your face, and it logs you in. Now the Find X does not have a fingerprint scanner on it. As you can see on the back here, there's no fingerprint scanner. There's no fingerprint scanner under the screen either, so it's basically relying on the camera to log you in. But it does it all pretty quickly. Oppo says that the camera can launch in as little as 0.5 seconds, which is pretty fast, as you can see. I'm doing it a bunch of times here. So then the screen itself, it's an OLED panel. It's got curved sides, which you can see here. It looks a lot like what you get on a Samsung S9 or S9 Plus. It's 1080 pixels of resolution. Basically, the phone itself kind of looks to me like an S9 with slimmer bezels, which is pretty cool. And then inside come all the high-end specs you'd expect from a 2018 Android smartphone. It's got Snapdragon 845, 8 gigabytes of RAM, up to 256 gigabytes of storage. It's global LTE compatible, and it's got dual SIM support. I've got a T-Mobile SIM in here, and it's pulling an LTE signal here in New York, so it works here in the US, which is pretty cool to see. Now for software, it's running Oppo's Color OS software, which runs on Android 8.1. It basically looks like a mix of iOS and Samsung's Android software. It's not the nicest Android software I've ever seen. It definitely doesn't look like a Pixel, but it's not the worst either, and you could probably get used to it pretty quickly. And it seems to have all of the main features that we look for on an Android phone at this point, even including a gesture navigation system, which is pretty cool. Now, other hardware features, it's got a big 3700 milliamp hour battery, and it's got Oppo's VOOC fast charging, which is basically the same thing as OnePlus's Dash Charge, so it can recharge really quickly over a wire. But there's no wireless charging here, so what are you gonna do? The other big thing that's missing is there's no headphone jack, which isn't a huge surprise in 2018, but it's unfortunate, all this engineering, and they couldn't put in a headphone jack in it. Now, Oppo says they're gonna be bringing this to North America. The pricing is still a little bit up in the air, at least here in the US, but they're saying it's gonna be priced less than other major smartphones from Samsung and LG, so I'd expect to see it probably under $700. And even more interesting, they're gonna be selling it with a carrier, or at least so they claim. We don't have any information on that yet, so you'll have to stay tuned, but that should be pretty interesting. Now, is this the future of smartphones? I don't know. I think it's really interesting. It gives me a lot of screen without a lot of bezel, and it's an interesting compromise to, you know, making sure that it has the things like front-facing cameras and sensors and things like that that we all expect on a smartphone. I do have a little bit of concerns. I'm not sure how you put a case on this thing. I guess it could only wrap around the side. You can't really put a case on top. And what happens if you drop it, or you go to the beach and get sand in it or whatever? There might be some reliability concerns with it. But otherwise, I think it's really neat, and I'm eager to spend more time with this and play with it more.